Hello everybody and welcome to this video which focuses on how to plan a narrative answer for question 5 on paper 1 of the AQA GCSE English language exam. Now if you've been following my channel closely you will have noticed that I've already uploaded a video on how to plan an answer for a writing to describe piece. So this is the second video, which focuses on how to plan an answer for question 5. So we know already that question 5 is worth 40 marks and you have 45 minutes to answer the question, and you either choose to write a narrative or a describe piece if you're given one of each, or you might be given 2 narrative questions, or you might be given 2 describe questions. So I would certainly advise looking at my describe video and going through this one as well, so you know what you need to focus on for each of these types of writing. You need to spend 5 minutes planning your answer, whether you're doing a writing to describe or writing to narrate, okay? Just in order to make sure you structure those thoughts in your mind and you really plan what you're going to include in your answer. Now, a suggested question by the AQA exam board is this one: write a story set on a dark night as suggested by the picture. So they might give you a picture, or they might just give you a question itself, and they might just say write a story about, okay? So in this case we've got this image and we can use this image as inspiration for our story. So we don't have to specifically focus our story on that picture itself, but we can use it as inspiration. So when we're writing a story, we need to focus on the plot. So what is the story actually about? We need to focus on the characters, so who's actually going to be in our story. We need to consider the setting, so where our story is going to be based. And we also need to think about, are we going to write it in first person, as if you are actually there, or are you going to write in third person, so you're looking on at the characters within the story and you would say he or she, okay? So you are literally narrating that story to us and focusing on what the characters are doing themselves, okay? Now you also need to consider the structure of your narrative piece, and I have a separate video on narrative structure as I feel it's really important for you to focus on that, and it's too much to cover in one video, so I would certainly advise watching that video either before the end of this one or watch it at the end, just to make sure you fully understand narrative structure. You know that you need to focus on including different sentence structures, you need to focus on your paragraphing, you need to make sure you include 5 types of punctuation, and you also need to focus on your vocabulary. So all of these things are in the mark scheme for question 5. You also need to think about any linguistic features, figurative language such as metaphors, similes and personification, lots of sound effects such as alliteration and assonance. So all of these things you need to include in your writing to narrate piece. So I'm going to show you 4 ways you can easily plan an answer within the 5 minutes planning time for this question. And what I've done is I've based my answers, my planning answers, on that question that I gave you at the beginning of the video. Now, I am definitely not the most creative person in the world, so please forgive how boring my story is, and I'm sure you could probably come up with much better answers for that question. But the aim of it is to show you how you can physically plan an answer, okay? So we've got numbers and time, a grid, a structure, and a 5W plus H plan, which I actually saw on Google the other day, and I quite like that one. So first of all, if I was to plan an answer using my numbers time format, I would write down a list of 5 things. So it would be about 5 paragraphs perhaps. And then I would consider what I was going to include in each one of those paragraphs. So it's just like writing a list really, and structuring what you're going to include in each of those sections of your answer. So here I've got the character leaves band practice, it's early evening, the moonlight. And then they go for a walk through the park, they're confused. So I've really considered the character's emotions and feelings at each part of the story. the introduction of a new character in section 3, and then I've considered how to include a flashback, which again is an interesting structural element. Okay, so I will be focusing on that in my narrative structure video, so it's definitely worth watching that one too. And then the final element of my answer would be the consideration as to whether that character has chosen the right path. So the actual walking down the paths is an overall extended metaphor really for about making choices in life. So that was my inspiration taken from that image, and I've literally just plotted down in order how I would structure a story for that question. So that is probably the easiest and most simplest way of planning an answer. What you could do is you could go one further and you could plan where you're going to use your different types of punctuation in each section and which linguistic devices, features you're going to use in each section as well, just to make sure that you can tick those off as you work through your answer, ensuring therefore that you do actually cover everything that you need to for the mark scheme. So that's your numbers time one. So this is the 5W plus H plan, and I actually really like this one. I think this is my favourite. So you need to consider who will be in the narrative, where the narrative will take place, why the characters do what they do, what the narrative's about, when the events happen, and how the conflict is resolved. I'll go into detail in my narrative structure video about conflict in stories, okay? So most stories have a conflict within them, and there are lots of different conflicts that you can discuss. So you need to consider what type of conflict may be in your story. So for this 5W plus H plan, you literally just jot down listed ideas. So who's included in it? So I've got a young teenage boy and an old man, where it takes place, why, what actually happens within the story, what, okay, so the pathways are a metaphor for life, the character asks the old man for guidance, when it takes place, and you know, how it ends. So the walk down the path, the light at the end, ending the story with an unanswered question, which is always a very powerful way of ending a narrative. So again, just listing things, which is easily done within 5 minutes. So that's your 5W plus 5H's plus W, 5W's plus H rather. Okay, and this is my structure plan. Again, this is based on my narrative structure video, so you really do need to watch that in order to fully understand this plan. So this is based on Aristotle, who was a Greek philosopher, famous Greek philosopher, and his theory on narrative structure. And he said that each narration, each story really had 5 elements. And this is called Freytag's pyramid. Again, he based his work on Aristotle's theories. So he said that each story had 5 parts. There was an exposition, so a state of play at the beginning, a state of rising action when things take place. And, you know, often you'll find that in detective stories, for example, you get lots of clues and the drama and impact builds up. And then there's a climax when you might find out who the murderer is. And then a falling action as, you know, things start to settle, you find out who the murderer is. And then a resolution, which is the new state of things within the story. So you can actually plan your answer based on this structure. So in mine, my exposition would be the leaving the band practice. My rising action would be the character walking through the park. And again, I've considered the emotions of the character and that they are disorientated and confused. My climax is when my character reaches the centre of the branching pathways and sees the old man on the bench. My falling action would include a flashback to previous time when a bad decision perhaps had been made, and then that character realising that that bad decision had been made. And then my resolution is my character walking down a pathway perhaps towards the light and then considering whether he's made the right choice. So actually that is a really, really clever way of structuring and planning for a particular narrative structure. And then finally, my grid plan, you may like to do this. So you consider your action that's taking place, where it's taking place, the characters that are involved, and the emotions that they're feeling. So at each point in my story, okay, it works down the grid. I've considered what action's taking place and where it is. So at the beginning of my story, the action that's taking place is my character, who is Anthony, is leaving band practice and he's walking through the park and he feels weary at this point. And then Anthony reaches a dark alleyway. He's lost. He doesn't know which pathway to take. He's disorientated, confused and fearful. So what I've done is I've really considered how the character feels. So this is a particularly good way of planning in the emotions of a character. So those are just 4 simple ways that you can plan a story in 5 minutes. 5 minutes isn't an awful lot of time, so you really just need to focus on what's actually taking place, who your characters are, how they're feeling, okay, and also the setting, so where it's taking place. So plot, characters, setting. Your narrative structure is also important, so please do watch my video on narrative structure. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll get updates of when my new videos are added, and you'll see that there are loads of videos for Paper 1 and Paper 2 for the AQA GCSE English Language Exam. The resources for all of those videos can be found on my website, aishaexams.wordpress.com, and all of those resources are available to you for free. And if you want to post a question or post a review, you can do so on Twitter. Follow me at AishaExams. Thanks for listening.